She was silver-scaled and gold-eyed, and she could swallow a horse whole. She burned 4,000 men at the field of fire in a single afternoon. She flew further than any dragon of the Conquest, and her rider loved the sky more than she loved the throne. And on a hot evening above a Dornish keep called the Hellholt, one iron bolt ended all of it. Welcome to Westeros Within, where we journey into forgotten ages, hidden legends, and ancient mysteries. This is Dragons of Westeros, Episode 3, Meraxes, the silver dragon who fell in Dorne. The old tales say she hatched on the black rock of Dragonstone during the 100 years of chaos that followed the doom of Valyria. She was named for a god of the freehold, and the syllables of that forgotten deity survived on her back long after the temples of Valyria had sunk into the sea. Where Balerion was black as pitch, Meraxes was bright. Silver scales that caught the sunlight over the gullet, eyes the color of molten gold, the living mirror of the house that rode her. She was smaller than Balerion, and in those first years larger than Vhagar. The chronicles say she could swallow a warhorse whole, and she was claimed, very young, by the girl who would love her more than any rider of that age loved any dragon. Her name was Rhaenys. Rhaenys Targaryen was the youngest child of Lord Aerion of Dragonstone. Her brother Aegon would one day take both his sisters to wife in the old Valyrian fashion, and of his two queens, Rhaenys was always the favourite. Aegon, the court gossip said, spent 10 nights in Rhaenys' bed for everyone he spent in Visenya's. Visenya was the sister of Iron and Silence. Rhaenys was the sister of Song. She was kind-hearted, curious, given to flights of fancy. She brought singers to the Targaryen court so the common folk would sing of her house. She cared for the small folk in a way her siblings did not. But above all of it, Rhaenys loved to fly. The chronicles tell us she spent more time on the back of her dragon than her brother and sister spent on theirs combined. She was once heard to say that she meant to fly Meraxes across the sunset sea to see what lay upon its western shores. She did not want an empire, she wanted the horizon, and Meraxes carried her. When Aegon landed at the mouth of the Blackwater to begin the War of Conquest, 3 dragons flew above him. Balerion, Vhagar, and Meraxes, bright as a coin spun against the sun. She drew first blood in the Stormlands. When Aegon sent his half-brother Orys Baratheon south to break the Storm Kings, it was Rhaenys and Meraxes who dropped out of the clouds at the battle they would call the Last Storm, turning a losing field into a burning one so that Orys could cut down Argilac the Arrogant in single combat. Then Rhaenys landed alone in the yard of Storm's End, and the sight of a silver dragon in the stone heart of the Durrandon fortress was enough to make the garrison bind their own queen in chains and yield the castle. The Stag of Storm Country became the Stag of House Baratheon that same year. Then came the day of the 3 dragons. On the rolling fields south of the Blackwater, King Mern of the Reach and King Loren of the Rock brought together the largest army the 7 kingdoms had ever seen. 60,000 men. Against them, Aegon had scarcely a fifth of that number, and 3 dragons. It was the only battle in all of history that would ever see Balerion, Vhagar, and Meraxes in the sky together. They set the dry summer grass alight in a ring around the great host, and then they closed the ring. 4,000 men burned where they stood. King Mern of House Gardner died in the fire with his sons, and every male of his line, ending one of the oldest royal houses in Westeros at a single stroke. Meraxes was one of the 3 jaws that made that field. They would call it the Field of Fire. There would never be another. After the coronation at Old Town, after the submission of the kings of the Rock and the North, 6 of the 7 kingdoms bent the knee. One did not. Dorne refused. The old princess of Dorne was Maria Martell, 80 years of age, blind and near bald, cruelly nicknamed the Yellow Toad by the Storm King. Rhaenys flew Meraxes alone to Sunspear and sat before her to demand submission. Maria's answer was this: I will not fight you, nor will I kneel to you. Dorne has no king. Call me princess. Tell your brother that. You may burn us, but you will not bend us, break us, or make us bow." Rhaenys flew home. What came after was 8 years of a war no dragon had been built to fight. The Dornish did not assemble their hosts on open fields. They faded into the Red Mountains. They hid in caves. They abandoned their castles before Meraxes' shadow touched the walls. And they came back in the night to burn Marcher villages of their own. Dragons can scorch stone, but dragons cannot hold a corridor of dust. And the Dornish, all the while, were practicing. Their weapon was the scorpion, a heavy siege crossbow on a swivel, firing an iron bolt the length of a man's arm. No chronicle of Westeros had ever recorded one aimed at a dragon. The trick, the Dornish discovered, was hitting something that moved faster than a bird. In the 10th year after the conquest, Rhaenys took Meraxes south again. She struck Starfall, she struck Skyreach. She turned at last toward a desert keep hard against the Red Sands, the seat of House Ulla, whose lords were said to be half mad and the other half worse. They called it the Hellholt. Meraxes came in low for her attack. On the castle's tallest tower, a scorpion was waiting. One bolt, one eye. Archmeister Gildane preserved the moment in a single line. A bolt from a scorpion pierced the eye of Meraxes, and the great dragon and the queen who rode upon it fell from the sky. She did not die in the air. In her death throes, the silver dragon came down on the Hellholt itself, and the weight of her broke the very tower that had shot her and tore down a section of the curtain wall. The crew who had cheered her fall died beneath her body. The Hellholt had shot her out of the sky, and the Hellholt now wore her like a crown of smoking silver, and Rhaenys. Here the chronicles fall silent in a way that still troubles the histories. Gildane gives us 3 accounts and confesses the truth will likely never be known. Some say she lost her seat in the fall and died of the impact before she ever touched the yard. Some say she stayed in the saddle all the way down and was crushed beneath the weight of her own dragon when Meraxes struck the stone. And some say, worst of all, that she survived the crash and the Ullas took her alive into their dungeons, and she died there slowly over days or weeks or longer. Her body never came home. When word reached King's Landing, Aegon did not weep in the chronicles we have. What he did instead, Westeros would remember for 2 years and call it the Dragon's Wroth. Balerion and Vhagar went south together. In their grief, the 2 remaining dragons of the conquest burned every Dornish stronghold at least once, save one. They left Sunspear standing in the hope that the other Dornish lords would turn on House Martell. They did not. Bounties were nailed to the doors of every Dornish keep, and bounties came back the other way. Septons who preached for peace were found dead in their cells. The fire lasted 2 years. Dorne did not break. And then in the 13th year after the conquest, old Princess Meria died in her own bed, and her son Nymor sent a peace delegation to King's Landing, led by his daughter and heir, Princess Daria Martell. Daria brought 2 things with her, a letter from Prince Nymor and the skull of Meraxes. Aegon read the letter on the Iron Throne. The old stories say he gripped the barbed blades until his hand began to bleed. When he finished, he burned the letter in a brazier, rose without a word, mounted Balerion, and flew alone to Dragonstone. When he returned days later, he accepted Dorne's terms, and the peace held for the rest of his reign. No living soul in the histories was ever told what Nymor's letter said. Some of the chronicles whisper that Rhaenys had in fact lived through the fall at the Hellholt and had been kept for 3 long years in the deep dungeons of House Ulla, and that the letter offered, as the price of peace, to end her suffering at last. Others whisper that the letter threatened to empty the whole treasury of Dorne to buy the faceless men of Braavos and turn them upon the cradle of Aegon's infant son. The maesters preserved both versions. Neither has ever been proven. What is certain is that Meraxes' skull was hung on the wall of the throne room of the Red Keep, silver bone against red stone, and she watched every Targaryen king through the hollow where her golden eye had been, until the day Robert Baratheon took the throne and had her carried into the cellars. So tell me this, if Princess Rhaenys had lived and flown Meraxes across the Sunset Sea, what do you believe she would have found on the other side? Write it in the comments. And if you want more stories from the dragons of Westeros, the ones who burned the Seven Kingdoms into being, and the ones who fell before the fire ever went out, subscribe to Westeros Within and join me for the next chapter. Because next time, we follow the pale silver she-dragon of a sickly prince, a dragon who grew alongside a child who should not have lived, and who carried him all the way to the Iron Throne. She was young, she was swift, she was the Mount of Rhaenys the Gentle, and above the still waters of the God's Eye, a wing was torn from her body by something black and ancient that had been waiting for her in the sun. She was the first dragon ever killed by another in the written histories of Westeros. Her name was Quicksilver,